Speaking of that cut down day and Tommy DeVito, we're not too far removed from him, of course, playing a few games in the Giants and becoming a star. Well, that's no longer the case. The Giants wasting no time, as Zach mentioned there, when it comes to releasing the quarterback. He's part of trade talks the past few days, and now he becomes a name to watch throughout the day of possibly either landing back on the practice squad if he clears waivers, or maybe finding a new home when it comes to Tommy D. For more on all this, our Jonathan Jones, lead NFL insider, and this is a worst day or bad day for players and coaches. They say, honestly, in the locker room, they hate it the most because it's the worst day there. But let's start with DeVito because the Giants releasing him. What does that mean for the future for him and the Giants QB room?
So the Giants sort of postured as though they could keep 4 quarterbacks on their 53-man roster earlier in the week. Keeping 4 quarterbacks on a roster almost never happens in the NFL, especially when you consider the expanded practice squads, the new elevation rules, and all of that. Teams just don't do it. They went out and they signed Russell Wilson. And when they signed him, they said, he is our week 1 starter. Nothing has taken them away from that. Then they go in the first round and draft Jackson Dart to be their franchise quarterback. He very well may start at some point this season. When you look at the Giants' schedule, when you consider the sort of draft capital they used on Jackson Dart, when you see how Brian Daboll looks at Jackson Dart, it's very possible, very likely, he'll be starting at some point this season. And then they signed Jameis Winston to a 2-year contract. So they don't want Jameis to go anywhere. They love his veteran presence there in the locker room, in the quarterback's room. In fact, when they signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston both, they got them for the price of 1 Daniel Jones in Indianapolis. So the Giants felt that was a win. Tommy DeVito was always sort of the odd man out. And would the Giants love to have him on the practice squad? Of course. But because he is so young in his NFL career, he's not released, he is waived. And when you are waived, you can be claimed off of the waiver wire. And so at 4 p.m. Eastern today, he will officially go on the wire. At 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday is when all of the claims are due. And so a team could pick him up, add him to their 53-man roster, very likely as a number 3 quarterback. Teams, as they continue to work through their quarterback room, they can decide, okay, we want 2 quarterbacks and we'll pick up a 3rd tomorrow. That could happen. If he goes unclaimed, I don't know how likely or unlikely that is right now. We still have to see how the rest of the quarterbacks around the NFL ultimately shake out today. But if he goes unclaimed, I think there is a very high probability that he returns to the Giants as their practice squad quarterback.
All right, we'll have to see what happens with Tommy DeVito, of course, as you mentioned there. He has to clear waivers if he wants to come back to the Giants. We'll see what happens with that. Elsewhere, you mentioned, of course, 4 QBs unlikely in QB rooms. When you look at Cleveland, that was the case now because Kenny Pickett is heading to Vegas. So you look at the guys wrestling there, Dylan Gabriel, and what's the other guy? Shedeur Sanders, still in the rosters behind Joe Flacco. Does that mean he is safe of all the commotion we've heard about from that final preseason game? Didn't look good, didn't look great. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Shedeur Sanders is safe, and Shedeur Sanders has always been safe. Really, if you are a draft pick selected by Andrew Berry, the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, you're safe in year 1. He doesn't cut draft picks in year 1, sometimes in year 2. Sometimes in year 3, Shedeur Sanders is sticking around in Cleveland. And right now, it certainly seems that the pecking order is going to be Joe Flacco at starter. And then it will be Dylan Gabriel, the 3rd-round selection, at QB2. And then it will be Shedeur Sanders at QB3. No practice squad. They're not going to cut him, or waive him and then risk someone picking him up on waivers just so they could stash him on the practice squad. He will be on the 53-man roster today, tomorrow, and the next day for the Cleveland Browns. But how does he work his way up the depth chart? It's really hard to do that during the season. Soon, the Browns are going to begin focusing on week 1. That means that Joe Flacco, while back in minicamp and training camp, someday he would have a veteran rest day. Sometimes they would mix and match some of the quarterbacks in with the ones. Joe Flacco will get all of QB1 reps. And then sometimes you're going to get Dylan Gabriel up there with the ones just a little bit, just to give him a little taste, right? But really, he's going to get all the second team reps at quarterback. At that point, during the season, during a regular practice week, there are no more reps to go around for a quarterback. And so you're looking at Shedeur Sanders being the scout team quarterback once we get to the regular season. I want to say that now. right? As we enter the final week of August, before that officially happens and before reporters start laying eyes on it and before it goes out there on social media, how could the Browns be burying Shedeur Sanders on the scout team? How dare they? This always happens with third quarterbacks, with rookies, with fifth-round picks, okay? So that is very, very likely to happen. And he just has to play his role, probably, unfortunately, wait for an injury or bad play by those above him to move up. But that's the way the NFL works. That's how it's going to go about for Shedeur Sanders these next few weeks, next few months, as he continues to figure out life in the NFL.
By the way, if his last name wasn't Sanders, we wouldn't be talking about it. But, of course, that's who he is, and that's why we're talking about him making it on the 53 as a fifth-round pick. So we're past pretty much all the hold-ins. We already got two out the way with Hendrickson and McLaurin. There's one man standing, Micah Parsons in Dallas, and we know the two have been going side by side. Jerry Jones, there's pictures of them not even talking to each other. Micah laying on the table during the last preseason game. Honestly, JJ, I don't know if there's any more news about it, but how much longer are we going to wait for this kind of to maybe mend fences between the two sides?
It could take a while. It could really take a while. Look, Terry McLaurin ultimately got a deal that when the final numbers come out, the contract has not been officially filed, but when the final numbers come out, I think a lot of people are going to learn it is not really a 3-year, $96 million contract as has been reported a lot of places. Trey Hendrickson, he wanted guarantees in future years, and that was the whole holdup for months, really for more than a year. He didn't get it from the Cincinnati Bengals, and both of those guys seemed dug in. You don't know dug in until you see that man's face right there, Micah Parsons. That man is dug in, right? You wonder if you can dig a hole to China dug in, okay? So I don't know how and when, I should say when, this reaches its conclusion, because it can go into the regular season. Look, he has complained of back tightness. There have been MRIs. There can be second opinions. This is all part of the NFL's collective bargaining agreement with the Players Association. We could wind up seeing a grievance involved. If the Dallas Cowboys say, we don't think that you're injured, and Micah Parsons says, no, I'm injured and I can't play, and this has nothing at all to do with my contract situation. That can absolutely happen, and we are not that far away from the start of the regular season. So because of how nasty these negotiations have gotten, and really I should say the absence of negotiations, right? Because Jerry Jones thought that he had a deal months ago with just Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons said, hold on now. I pay my agent some money to do these negotiations. Why don't we bring my agent in? Jerry Jones said, no, I'm not talking to your agent. We had a gentleman's agreement. That's that. And so there have been no negotiations. And now there's been a level of disrespect. And I think on both sides, they probably feel that way. So in conclusion, when will this conclude? This absolutely can go into the regular season. I will not at all be surprised if this does, in fact, go into week 1, week 2 for the Dallas Cowboys.
As you mentioned, we are on Jerry's time, so whenever he decides to put pen to paper, that's when it's going to happen, maybe into the regular season, as you noted there. Of course, we are getting close to that 4 p.m. Eastern deadline there with NFL teams getting down to 53. What are you watching from now until that point?
So you're always going to look at the quarterbacks, right? And so you're going to see who could potentially be moved. We've already seen Sam Howell on the move. We saw Kenny Pickett go to the Raiders. So we're going to see a little bit of some remaking at the bottom of quarterback depth charts around the league. We'll see how that shakes out. One big name to keep an eye on, of course, is Adam Thielen, the veteran wide receiver, now with the Carolina Panthers, has sort of toiled in the doldrums of bad seasons in Carolina after a fantastic career with the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings desperately, and I mean desperately, need wide receiver help. Not just for the season, but certainly for September, with Jordan Addison out the first 3 games of the season, which they expected, and Justin Jefferson still battling injury, though he should be available 100% ready to go in week 1. So I don't know that the two sides are ultimately going to come to an agreement on compensation in terms of draft pick compensation. We'll see. The Vikings certainly would have a backup plan because it's not Adam Thielen or bust for Minnesota. The last name to keep an eye out for, Cam Robinson, the offensive tackle currently with the Houston Texans. There is a need for offensive tackles across the NFL. If he ultimately gets dealt today, 2 teams that I could see dealing for him: the Atlanta Falcons, considering right tackle Caleb McGarry, and the Los Angeles Chargers after losing Rashawn Slater earlier this summer. Those are two teams I could see vying for Cam Robinson's talents if he ultimately is moved by 4 p.m. today.
Jonathan Jones, that just sounds like you have a very busy day ahead of you, my friend, until we get to 4 p.m. As always, appreciate your time tapping on the buzz. That just means we're getting closer to the season starting. Of course, that kicks off September 7th. Count on Sundays. Watch your local and games live on CBS and Paramount Plus. Don't forget, we got you tapped in on Monday mornings on the buzz at hour 30 for you right here.